My name is Bill Deere. I've spent the past 12 years trying to uncover the truth into the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Lyle Goldman in Los Angeles on Sunday night, June 12, 1994. I'm a private investigator, and my expertise is homicide. I don't have the powers of arrest like the Los Angeles Police Department did. I don't have the powers of subpoena like the district attorney did. I knew that when I entered this case, I would have to check and recheck all of my facts. But in addition to that, I would have to put together a team of experts in the field of pathology, psychiatry, forensics. I did just that. You will see them in this film. But you see, I possess one other thing. Intuitively, I have the ability to enter into the mind of a killer.
In Los Angeles County, 1,810 homicides were committed in 1994, 2 of which would become household names. June 13, 1994, officers Robert Rist and Miguel Terrazas arrive at 875 South Bundy to a grisly scene. They discover Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman have been savagely murdered.
It has a feeling of a personal murder.
I consider this as a rage killing.
The investigation quickly centers around Nicole's former husband, Orenthal James Simpson, known as O.J.
I've been convinced that O.J. Simpson murdered my sister since the morning of June 13th when I heard my mother screaming in her bedroom, and I ran back there and they said that your sister was murdered, and I knew it was O.J.
On June 17th, a warrant is issued for his arrest.
I think I just saw O.J. Simpson on the 5 freeway. He's heading north.
Over 90 million people tune in to see O.J. and a friend, Al County, during a low-speed chase as it moves across Los Angeles. Private investigator and author William C. Deere was speaking at the Investigative Reporters and Editors Convention in St. Louis that day.
As I've completed my speech, one man raised his hand and he said, "Mr. Deere, what about the car chase scene that's going on now with O.J. Simpson in Los Angeles?" And I said, "It's probably just something concocted by a lawyer that in the event O.J. Simpson is found guilty, he can holler and scream that O.J. couldn't get a fair trial. In all probability, the so-called car chase scene, if that's what it is going to go on for hours and hours." As I got back to my room, my son Michael said to me, "Dad, you've never assumed anything in all these years that you've been doing this business. You teach, never assume, and always verify, and you're assuming that O.J. Simpson's guilty." And I said, "But look what it says in the papers. Look what it says on television." "Dad, that's not the rules that you have taught homicide detectives by." My son was right. I made arrangements to fly to Los Angeles. I was going to find out for myself whether what I'd been reading, what had been seen, was fact or fiction. I wasn't going to assume anymore.
Bill Deere has uncovered startling new evidence that is certain to change everyone's perception of O.J.'s guilt. We'll show you evidence which has never been made public. We believe he has collected more than enough evidence to warrant an indictment and arrest of the overlooked suspect for the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. You will too. Learn why O.J. may have been willing to stand trial for murder as you walk step by step with Bill Deere through this compelling journey. Discover why he believes O.J. is guilty, but not of murder. A successful private investigator with extensive contacts and using his own money, Bill began a search for the truth, which would take over 10 years.
Once I arrived in Los Angeles with my assistant, Chris Stewart, we immediately went to the crime scene on Bundy. It was a media circus. You couldn't even get around anywhere. It was bumper to bumper. And from the crime scene all the way to O.J.'s was exactly the same thing. And I told Chris, let's come back late at night. Let's look at the scene then when there's nobody else around. Later that night, we drove back to Bundy. I got out of the car, walked around the crime scene from the front as much as you could, and then I went around Dorothy Street and came up through the alleyway. And the only thing that I saw was a tape that said, "Do not cross police lines." I could see the back gate that would have led to the walkway from the rear to the front where the assailant supposedly had gone that night. I wanted to see for myself whether what I was reading was true. I wanted to know whether or not O.J. was, in fact, the murderer. 2 days later, Sunday night, same night, except a little different day and time, within about 20 minutes of the timeline that had been put in the paper, Chris Stewart dropped me off on the corner of Bundy and Dorothy Street. I told him to stay away just in case things went wrong. I crossed the street, went down Dorothy, turned right, went up the alleyway, stepped over the police tape, went to the gate, climbed up and over the gate once I realized that there was nobody there. I didn't know what was going to be on the other side of the gate. Was it somebody waiting for me? Or was I going to really find out the truth? As I came over the top of the gate and I landed on my feet, I looked up and there was an overhead light. It should have come on, but it didn't. I never heard anybody say anything about it during the investigation and the reporting in the paper. But I walked that narrow walkway. I knew in my mind that that killer had walked the same way I was walking now. As I stepped up the steps, I then looked, stepped down the steps, walked a few paces, stepped up, and there to the right was Nicole's front door. I turned, looked at the door, realized by looking to the right that she could have seen who was at the door if she was careful. I immediately turned around very quickly, and as I did, I could still see some of the blood on the sidewalk. And there in that little small area that we'd led to believe was a big area was where the body of Ron Goldman had been found laying against the fence. I had learned that O.J. Simpson had done a video where he was supposed to be doing all these exercises. But a friend of mine who had been there told me that he was having a great deal of difficulty putting it all together. And they were having to do shoot after shoot after shoot, take after take after take, and that he was having severe trouble with his legs. Knowing that, and looking at the area where the crime occurred, I thought it would be very difficult for O.J. Simpson to have committed the murder. I knew that she'd been expecting Ron Goldman. That's what they said. But it wasn't Ron Goldman who apparently knocked on her door, but it wasn't a stranger. And if O.J. Simpson wasn't guilty, then I wanted to make every effort to prove that he wasn't guilty. But I also wanted to be able to prove who did commit the murder. And I know in my mind, after all these years of this investigation, two crucial things. I know that LAPD, the district attorney, have overlooked a major suspect. I'm thoroughly convinced that O.J. Simpson was at the crime scene, but after the murders. And I'm convinced that he knew all along, and has all along, known who the overlooked suspect was. And now you will. I've learned over the period of years to study a lot of law enforcement agencies around the country. I've been inducted in the Police Officers Hall of Fame as a private investigator. I'm pro-policeman. I do realize, though, that mistakes can be made. I realized that the LAPD and the district attorney had made a rush to judgment.
When the law enforcement people discovered the crime, they weren't interested in convicting anybody but O.J. Simpson.
Sometimes in homicide cases, one gets fixated on one individual.
I have found, both as a prosecutor and as a defense lawyer, that we all humans have a psychological trait or characteristic whereby sometimes we jump to a conclusion before we have all the relevant facts in. And from that point forward, our mind switches over to a selective processing mode whereby we focus in on all of the evidence that supports the conclusion we've already reached, and we discount or totally disregard any evidence that is inconsistent with the conclusion we've already reached.
Even if the investigation based on the LAPD led them initially to say O.J. was a suspect because of finding the glove, what you want to do on a criminal investigation is eliminate any other possible suspects.
You should have a universal pool of the suspect, then do by process elimination. when you reach to a point you cannot eliminate anybody, then that's become a possible suspect.
The Los Angeles Police Department and the district attorney concentrated on one person. They led us to believe that no one else committed these murders but O.J. Simpson. I made up my mind in all probability that O.J. Simpson may not have been the murderer. I was going to have to look at all new suspects if I was right. So I went back to the room and I laid out on pad and pencil who they might be. I looked at A.C. Cowling's name, Jason Simpson, O.J.'s oldest son, Marcus Allen. I went up to Brentwood. I stopped at the fire station, talked to a fireman. He told me about Nicole and how she used to come up to the fire station in these shorts, kind of short, very attractive, very friendly. And I thought, well, maybe a stalker. Maybe somebody had seen her and became infatuated with her. That's not unusual in Los Angeles. So that was another one I had to add to my list. I then heard about a man who said that he had been hired by O.J. to stalk and to kill Nicole. Checked on that. Man from prison. Turned out to be nothing. It was quite some time later that I was finally able to clear A.C. Cowlings because he was at a birthday party at the time. Jason Simpson, according to the LAPD, had been given an airtight alibi that he was cooking in front of 200 people. Marcus Allen supposedly had gone to be with his fiancée. I found no one to tell me about any stalkers in the neighborhood. I wasn't sure if I was going in the right direction, but I wanted to check every single thing that I possibly could. Once I then looked at all these suspects, it came out to about 10. I realized that everybody had an alibi. I didn't have any more suspects. The only suspect was O.J. Simpson. It was frustrating for me at the time because I really believed in what I was doing. I decided I had done all I could, so I went out to dinner that night, and somebody had mentioned this restaurant called Jackson's in Beverly Hills. I knew that O.J.'s son, Jason, had worked there at one time, so made reservations. Myself, Chris Stewart, several others entered the restaurant. And I said something to the maitre d', how many people does this restaurant hold? Oh, between 80 and 90 if we're full and all the way out the back. I said, so this is relatively a small restaurant, catering to a small amount of people. Oh, yes. The maitre d' then introduced the waiter that night. His name was Carlos Ramos. He said, Carlos has been with us since the day the restaurant Jackson's opened. If you need to ask him anything, he'd be more than glad to help you. He introduced himself. And I said, well, Carlos, I said, I used to eat in quite often on Sunday nights, and y'all then closed abruptly. He said, I think it was the last of June or the 1st of July, due to business being so slow, he said, we just shut the restaurant down on Sunday nights totally.
I was a busboy that time, or a food runner. It was really quiet, really, not a lot of people.
He said, you know, we had some publicity here. And I said, what was that? He said, well, the Nicole Simpson, Ron Goldman murders. And I said, yes. He said, well, O.J.'s son used to be our sous chef.
Because it was two chefs and him. So usually, you know, the sous chef stays on Sunday when the chefs are not there.
Do y'all shut your grill down early when business is slow? He said, oh, yes.
On Sundays, I remember for sure we closed the kitchen at 9. By 9 o'clock, you know, kitchen was closed. That time, we didn't get more people.
He remembers Jason's girlfriend, Jennifer Green, coming in.
When there was a slow night like that, she would come in and they were just right there on the, either on the office or, you know, just there if he was not busy, you know, just talking.
I said, did both Jennifer Green and Jason leave the restaurant together? Yes. And I said, how would they have left? Well, they were gone out the back, got into his Jeep. My understanding, he said that Jennifer was using Jason's Jeep that night and came through the back and was there to pick him up. I said, well, what time do you think that Jason might have left? He said, oh, he thought for a moment. He says, well, I think it was around 9:30 because I thought I heard him say to Jennifer, I'm going to be a few more minutes and then we'll leave. So in other words, Carlos, Jason left about 9:30 that night on Sunday, June 12th. Is that right?
Yes. They always, usually the chefs or the cooks, they always leave first than us because they're done with serving the food, and yeah, they usually leave earlier.
And he said, I think I left about 10:30. All of a sudden, I realized that if Jason Simpson had been given an airtight alibi, like the LAPD had said, that he was cooking in front of 200 people on the night of Sunday, June 12th, and that he did not leave the restaurant till 11 o'clock, somebody wasn't telling the truth.
200 people usually only on Saturday nights. That's what we did on Saturdays, not on Sundays. If he stated that he was cooking for 200 people at 11 o'clock, it's impossible, not at 11 o'clock.
Out of my 10 suspects that I had eliminated, one of those suspects now had been lifted out of the 10 and became very important to me. At that point, I needed to know if Jason Simpson had a reason to commit a murder. 2, we now know that he left the restaurant early that night. And the one other thing that I remembered asking Carlos, did Jason Simpson have his own chef knives?
He always lived with his bag, never left them. Mm-hmm.
So on Sunday, June 12, 1994, Jason left the restaurant about 9:30, had his chef's knives. There was a problem between his girlfriend. He appeared to be upset. I said to myself, if that's the case, we've overlooked a major suspect. I made plans now to thoroughly investigate Jason Simpson. Even though I had thought I had investigated him, I relied on the fact that LAPD said they had cleared him. They hadn't.
He refused to cooperate and was represented by counsel. So he was never, in fact, interviewed.
Over the many years as a private investigator, I've developed a lot of source contacts. I've helped a lot of law enforcement people. I know a lot of people, period. As a result of that, and through our investigation, I was able to determine the following: that Jason Lamar Simpson had been in a mental institution.
So here I sit, on a hospital-issued, very tacky, pink, plastic, and wood chair, on level 2. Yes, level 2. I survived 21 years, 2 suicide attempts, countless drug-filled nights.
I needed Jason Simpson's medical records. I finally was able to obtain them. Those records tell a lot about Jason Simpson. He's crying for help. At 14, he experimented with drugs, had a seizure, and when admitted to the hospital, tested positive for cocaine. He experimented with LSD and mushrooms between the ages of 15 and 19. He was diagnosed with a seizure disorder, major depression, and abuse of drugs and alcohol. On the night of June 12, 1994, Sunday, Jason Lamar Simpson, the oldest son of O.J. Simpson, 24 years old, 5'11", 235 pounds, was actually on probation for allegedly assaulting his previous employer, Paul Goldberg, with a knife. That was a red flag for me. If he was arrested for a number of charges, pled to a lower charge, but one of the charges was assaulting his previous employer with a knife, that meant to me that Jason Lamar Simpson had a temper. As a condition of his probation, Jason was ordered to undergo 25 sessions with psychologist Dr. Burton Katay.
I just told you I thought he was too stupid to do it.
His response was that Jason had an airtight alibi. Secondly, that Jason was too stupid or not smart enough to do this particular crime.
It caused you great concern, didn't it?
Yeah, it caused me a lot of concern, yeah.
Well, I used to do therapy over the phone with him.
Oh, really?
Oh, I loved it. It was great. It was great, man. It was like, it was like the LAPD was like, hey, you gotta, I say, you make sure you see your therapist. Oh, okay. Hey,
hello
Bert.
there.
Hello. Hey, fine, bye. For a psychologist, this is my personal opinion, I felt he was a very gullible man.
It's funny when you go to a therapist. You could just sit there and listen. You could even bullshit your way through a session.
Nicole was good with those kids. She loved Jason. She would go out with Jason, and she goes, Jason, come on, let's go dance. She was a good stepmom when she was living on Gretna Green. She pays me because of a peeping Tom. So I said, asked her, well, what's going on? And she goes, well, I was in the kitchen and I could have swore someone was peeping through my window, you know, and when I looked, they ran. And so I said, who do you think it was? She goes, well, I thought it was OJ. She said, but it looked like Jason.
3 attempted suicides where he cut his wrists and stabbed himself in the stomach, and he took an overdose of pills.
I laugh at the idea of killing myself. Mere contemplation sends me in worlds and places so ludicrous. I often want to kick myself for the act of putting myself through the process. The end result being self-inflicted pain. No more, no less. I kill me.
Some people who are extra angry are willing to be even angry at themselves and harm themselves. An instance that comes to mind in the records that I have reviewed with Jason Simpson is when he stabbed himself in the abdomen with a pair of scissors. It seems to me that self-injurious behavior or anger itself is just another expression of anger.
Just weeks prior to the murders, he had checked into the Cedars-Sinai Hospital, telling the doctors that he was out of his medication Depakote and about to rage.
Depakote is a drug that is used to treat individuals who have seizure disorders, and it's also used in individuals who have what's called a bipolar disorder. And this would be an individual that would range from perhaps a depressed condition to a condition of mania or extreme out of control kind of rage.
If Jason Simpson was in a hospital 6 months before the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman, his potential for violence is made higher simply by being at a psychiatric hospital.
On the night of Sunday, June 12, 1994, we knew that Jennifer Green, driving Jason's Jeep, came to Jackson's to pick him up at work. We also uncovered something that was extremely important. Just weeks prior to the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman, Jennifer Green had been attacked by Jason Simpson. In fact, the article, front cover on National Enquirer, inside was statements made that Jennifer Green had said, "I thought he was going to choke me to death." Now, this was just 2 weeks prior to the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. According to Dee Dee, a former girlfriend, she had approached Jason on the night of his birthday, 94, to wish him a happy birthday. They had gone together for several years. As she approached Jason, she went up and gave him a hug, a little kiss, and said, "Happy birthday, Jason." As she did, Jennifer Green, his girlfriend, became irate and said something derogatory toward Dee Dee. Jason turned to her and said, "Don't you ever talk to Dee Dee like that." She gets up and starts to run out. Dee Dee watches as Jason and some of his friends run after Jennifer Green. Jennifer Green then makes it into a car. Jason then reaches inside and pulls her out through the window and attacks Jennifer Green again. Dee Dee went on to tell me a number of things, that she too had been attacked by Jason. They had lived together on and off for 3 or 4 years. That one time he was mad at her. As a result, he chased her, got her down on the floor at the apartment they were living in, and took his chef's knife and cut off all her hair. Another incident occurred when Dee Dee said Jason, in a fit of rage, picked her up over his head and threw her into a tub that had no water in it and nearly broke her back.
Again, it has happened again. That monster that I swore disassociation with resurfaced and acted with unspeakable candor. All frustration surfaced and lashed out on her. She can get in my skin sometimes. I did nothing, none of the things I was accused of. Yet she persisted upon thinking and saying I did. That was all it took.
She said, "He even stalked me in New York after chopping off my hair. I was trying to get away from him, and he moved into OJ's apartment and stalked me." We finally got back together, but on a very limited basis. And I still like him to this day. Does he suffer from rage? Absolutely. Does he have problems? Yes. Did I talk to him just prior to the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman? Yes. He invited me over to his new apartment that he was living alone at. And I said, "Jason, are you still taking your Depakote to control your rage disorder and your bipolar situation?" He told me I quit taking that stuff. It was making me sick. All of a sudden in my mind, I realized that a person who suffers from a rage disorder or who's bipolar, who quits taking his medication to control that can go off the deep end at any moment.
One of the problems with discontinuing that kind of medication is that whatever the tendencies were before, they may return and may return to an extreme degree when the medication is stopped.
I also uncovered another fact, that when Jason was about 10 years old, he had a new sister. She was about 23 months old. Her name was Erin. His older sister, Arnell, was in the front of the house washing the car. Jason was supposed to be watching Erin, who was by the swimming pool. For some reason, Jason Simpson left the child alone. The child fell into the pool, was rushed to the hospital, but died. From that point on, Jason Simpson had developed some sort of problems.
Learning that the girl drowned in the swimming pool and Jason was present certainly would be a concern to me and could be, you know, a precursor to some of the problems that he's having.
The triggering of major mental illnesses, that is to say, major depression, bipolar disorders, schizophrenic disorders, are triggered by awful events or events that produce trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder.
All this was beginning to develop into a tremendous story about Jason Lamar Simpson. If we knew about Jason's criminal record, we knew about his other problems, and now we knew about his medical records, we knew about his problems with his previous girlfriends, the interviews with Carlos Ramos, I wanted to put Jason Simpson kind of under a microscope. I wanted to know what was going into his trash. I wanted to know what he was doing. Once we started uncovering in the trash numerous bottles of tequila, we realized that Jason, who was a member of the AA, was back onto a drinking binge.
I have fun when I'm slipping, drinking. That's why I keep slipping. Continue to slip. I even want more. Crack, cocaine, ecstasy, more to drink. Even my veins, for the first time ever, are beginning to hunger for anesthetic drugs.
The records say that he took psilocybin. The records say that he took cocaine. The records say that he took hallucinogenic drugs, stimulant drugs, and depressant drugs. Any drugs that he would have been taking, their effects would have been multiplied by the Depakote.
We also watched him as he rented movies time after time, would stay kind of to himself, locked up in his place in Venice Beach, California. It was a small bungalow, very inaccessible from the street until you passed two individual bungalows to go toward his in the back. All he had was his dog. He wasn't going anywhere. At that point, he had lost his job at a new restaurant where he had been hired to come in with a previous chef who had at one time been at Jackson's restaurant. As soon as the O.J. trial was over and O.J. was found not guilty, a civil trial was being prepared against O.J. Simpson. We found a civil deposition of Jason Lamar Simpson. The deposition was taken May 8, 1996, at this law firm located on Olympic Boulevard. Jason attended with his lawyer, Carl Jones, and he was questioned by Daniel Petrocelli. Also in attendance was Fred Goldman, father of Ron Goldman.
To me, this was a difficult deposition to take because this is the son of the man whom my client and I believe murdered Ron Goldman.
I saw his demeanor as very sad, almost in some way out of touch with it.
In that deposition, it turned out that he admitted, Jason, that he had never been interviewed by the LAPD, the district attorney's office, or anyone else concerning the murders.
Were you ever interviewed by any lawyers or investigators retained by O.J. Simpson's criminal defense team?
Never interviewed, no.
They never asked you where you were on the night of June 12th or anything like that?
I think maybe once. No, I don't think so. Well, yeah, I guess so.
Were you interviewed by anybody else?
No.
Any members of the prosecution team, the district attorney's office?
No.
Or the Los Angeles Police Department?
No, sir.
How could you clear somebody if you couldn't even interview them? But now we had it from Jason's own words.
One new fact that emerged, insofar as I was concerned, was that the plans for the family to go to the recital, to go to dinner after the recital on June 12, were made with Nicole and Jason on Friday or Saturday before the murder, and the plan was to go to Jackson's for dinner.
This was going to be the first time that Jason had ever cooked for the family at a restaurant.
I was expecting whoever to show up.
Including your father, right?
Yeah.
Including Sydney, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Including Justin, right?
Yes.
Including Nicole, right?
Yeah.
And Nicole's family, right?
I didn't know parts of Nicole's family. I didn't know who was coming.
You knew Lou and Judy were coming, right?
Yeah, I knew those two were.
But something happened that night.
Okay, let's go back to the telephone call that you had with Nicole on June 12th. Who called whom?
I don't remember. I probably called her, though, I would think, just to find out exactly how many people were coming, you know, that whole thing. I think I did call her, actually, to find out exactly how many people, if they wanted to, like, you know, a fixed menu. What time do you think you guys are going to be there?
Tell me what she said after you called her.
She said she didn't think that they were going to be swinging by Jackson's because it was just too expensive. And the kids, by the time they got way out there, they were going to be all restless. And by the, you know, we're just going to have dinner up the street. I mean, she went to Mezzaluna all the time, so it was just easier for her. I figured, okay, fine, go. I was kind of hurt.
Could it have been, based on the deposition, that she failed to call him, and he was embarrassed at Jackson's, anticipating the whole family's going to come, and I'm going to get to show off my talents?
And I said, why don't you guys come into the restaurant? And she thought it was a great idea. So we were getting all excited about her coming to the restaurant, or the kids coming to the restaurant, the whole family coming to the restaurant. I was excited because I didn't want to have to miss another recital. And like I said, I felt like finally, you know, I'd be able to take care of everything.
It turned out that Mezzaluna, where she ended up that night, was no more difference in price than Jackson's restaurant. Now, early on, prior to the dinner and prior to this deposition, the one thing that sticks out in my mind is that O.J. that night, early on in the evening, along with Nicole and the whole family, attended Sydney, that's O.J.'s youngest daughter, recital. There are films that shows O.J. after the recital with Sydney, smiling and laughing on camera, hugging the family, being friendly and cordial, but yet, according to the LAPD, was planning a premeditated murder of Nicole Simpson at her residence on Bundy Drive that night. But at the recital, O.J. Simpson knew that Sydney was going to have a sleepover that night. He would have had no way whatsoever to know that the little girl canceled at the last moment. Nobody picked up the phone and said, oh, guess what, O.J.? The little girl's not coming over tonight, so we're just going to go out for ice cream and come home. That couldn't have happened that way. If O.J. was in such a good frame of mind at the recital, and Jason's anticipating cooking that night, can you imagine what kind of letdown that would have been for a person who's quit taking his medicine? A man who was planning on the excitement of having his whole family over there to show off his talents? Could Jason then, when she didn't show up, started drinking, maybe doing a little drugs? That may have been the reason that Jennifer Green was crying. We also uncovered this. I met personally with Jennifer Green. She said that she arrived at the restaurant about 9 o'clock, went inside and confronted Jason. And he told her, I'm going to be a few more minutes. She went back out the Jeep, came back in, and they walked out, and according to Jennifer Green, left the restaurant at Jackson's at about 9:30 on the night of June 12th. They drove directly, with Jason driving the Jeep now, to her place, parked the Jeep and got out, went upstairs, and Jason stayed with her till after 11 o'clock that night. But in the civil deposition taken on May 8th, that's not what Jason said.
When you left the restaurant on the evening of June 12th, did you wait for your girlfriend there at the restaurant?
Yeah, she had my car.
So your girlfriend picked you up?
In my car, yes.
From the restaurant?
Yes.
And drove you where?
To her apartment.
And what did you do there?
I dropped her off.
And then went to your apartment?
Yes.
Did you go into her apartment at all?
I don't think so. No, I didn't. I just kissed her in the car and she went home.
Jason Simpson got home to his apartment.
His own apartment.
His own apartment on the evening of June 12 at around 10:30 p.m. and said he was there the rest of that night watching television until 3 in the morning.
Then he admits, the phone rang. I heard it ringing after 3 o'clock several times, but I didn't answer it.
Okay. Did you then get a phone call sometime in the middle of the morning?
Yeah. Yes.
From whom?
From first my sister, but I didn't answer the phone.
Why not?
I didn't want to get up. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what time it was.
How did you know it was your sister?
I found out. In retrospect, I know it was my sister.
Why would you not answer a phone after 3 o'clock when you have an elderly grandmother, you have a mother, could have been your father, brother, sister, somebody sick or injured needing your help, but he doesn't answer it until later that morning.
We got a phone call at around 6 a.m. from his mother, Marguerite, and then Arnell.
Then he immediately drives, according to his deposition, to Jennifer Green.
I first went to my girlfriend's house on the way because I couldn't drive. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. I told you before, I have epilepsy. I have to take my pills in the morning and at night. Sometimes, you know, when I'm scared, I didn't want to get too overly excited. And on the way, I just had to pull over. And I was right by our house. So I went there and I banged on her door, kind of collapsed there for a second, and no more than 5 minutes, and said, I gotta go get Arnell. So I went to the house, Rockingham.
What did he say to Jennifer Green? Did he ask Jennifer Green to give him an alibi? And then from there, he went on over to the house. Those are all red flags as an investigator. Why would O.J. Simpson have prepared to kill Nicole knowing full well that Justin's going to be there, Sydney's going to be there, Sydney's going to have a sleepover, it's on a summer night, okay? And having all this happening, that he's going to plan a premeditated murder in front of all these children? I've been in this business a long time. That's not the way you plan a premeditated murder. Not knowing exactly what time she might get in with the kids. When she stopped over and had ice cream and then came home. O.J., when he left the recital, putted some golf balls in his driveway. Then about 8 o'clock, he and Cato drove to McDonald's and got a hamburger. From that point, they drove back to the house.
If somebody planned to kill two people, should probably all psyched up, shouldn't go drive, have a hamburger.
We also had learned through our investigation that O.J. Simpson becomes woozy at the sight of blood.
Right away you see some problem. The theory say one man, only one man, O.J. Simpson. First of all, the talent did not fit. Second is fierce fight and struggle with a small knife, because that's the weapon. If you have a samurai saw or a gun, that's a different story. It's a small knife, hand-to-hand combat.
Now, there was a fact that was brought up early on in the beginning of the arrest and during the trial that O.J. Simpson played a part called Frogman. It was a movie that was being shot in L.A., and that he bought a stiletto during the day of the shooting in front of Ross Cuttery. Well, we also know, and we can prove, that the knife that he had bought from Ross Cuttery did not commit the murders.
A Swiss Army knife or any of these folding knives, they're more utility type devices. They're meant for, you know, cutting cords and maybe whittling if you're into that. They are nice knives to have, but they are not intended to inflict harm. And if you had such a weapon, again, you have the problem of the hand slipping up onto the blade and getting fairly severe cuts.
Now, if O.J. Simpson is not used to a knife, and the hand-to-hand combat fight that he had, or whoever the suspect was, had with Ron Goldman, that person would have had to been trained very well in the use of a knife, because Ron Goldman was certainly trained in the field of karate.
Ron Goldman is a very strong young man, and she's also pretty strong too.
And if you look at the wounds on Ron Goldman, and you look at the bruised knuckles,
we can see a fierce fight, and why has no injury. That's what one thing we question. And we examined O.J. Simpson's body inch by inch. Dr. Baldwin and me, we did photograph, we document that. We even examine his lip, and usually if you land a punch on your mouth, usually you see bruises and soft tissue, but we did not see any.
And you look at the bottom of his tennis shoe and realize that even the bottom of his tennis shoe was cut by the assailant's knife.
The thick soles on the bottoms of the tennis shoes are thick rubber, and for a knife to actually cut those with some certainty, they would have to be very sharp.
That person who was wielding that knife at the scene that night of June 12th had to know exactly what he was doing, and he certainly had to be familiar with a knife. O.J. wasn't, but Jason Lamar Simpson was. Our suspect was trained armed-to-arm combat while he was at the Army-Navy Academy. And I received a letter from one of his former classmates in which he said, upon hearing of the murders, I and everyone else I know who knew him immediately suspected JJ, a nickname given to Jason. He also was known to carry a knife either on his side or in his boot. He was also known to carry his chef knives underneath the driver's seat. Would that not make our suspect more viable than that of O.J. Simpson, who gets woozy at the sight of blood? If, according to Jason's deposition, Nicole Simpson did not show up at the restaurant and he was embarrassed, 2, he wasn't taking his medication, 3, we know he has a rage disorder, 4, we know that he does not like women to lie to him, he possibly could have taken Jennifer Green, argued with her a little, dropped her off, and in the 15 minutes it takes to go from her place or from Jackson's to Nicole's, he's getting madder and madder. As he pulls in the alleyway, there he sees Nicole's black Cherokee parked. He pulls beside it and gets out. As he comes through the back gate and approaches a door, he knocks on that door. Nicole thinks it's Ron Goldman. She opens the door, and standing there is Jason Lamar Simpson, and he's certainly not in a good frame of mind. And they may have gotten into a heated argument. And at that time, the verbal argument and the abusive language that may have transferred from one to the other caused Jason to lose it, with Nicole then slapping Jason, and the rage sets in. They hear the gate open. He reaches for the knife and comes out to attack Nicole and comes down on the top of her head. She slumps unconsciously to the pavement, lying on her side. And all of a sudden, Ron Goldman hears what's going on. And he runs toward him, and the next thing you know, he's pinned into an area. He has no knife. He has no way of defending himself. So he goes into the posture of karate, kicking up his foot and saying the words, hey, 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 that were introduced by a witness in the trial.
The hey, hey, hey would have been a great distraction technique to draw attention away from Nicole and bring it to Ron. I think then he approached and got closer to the threat, again trying to protect Nicole.
Repeatedly, Goldman hits the assailant over and over, and that counts for the red marks on his knuckles. And once Ron Goldman has sustained nearly 27 stab wounds, he falls down, either dead or dying. And by this time, Nicole Simpson, who is not dead, not seriously hurt, is starting to come to, and the rage has set in to such a degree that the assailant feels in his own mind that he has no choice whatsoever but to kill Nicole. So that's when he puts his foot on her back, pulls her hair back, and cuts her throat 3 times with the same knife, nearly decapitating her, dropping her body and running out. And then as he does, the bipolar or rage disorder starts to dissipate. And he realizes, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done? As an investigator, I can picture it as Jason pulls out from Nicole Simpson's driveway after the murders. There were things going over in his mind. He had to make it back to Jackson's restaurant. He had to get rid of these bloody clothes. He had to pull his old time card and replace it with a new one. But more importantly than anything, the critical factor for Jason at this point would have been to call his dad. I need my dad. He'll know what to do. O.J. learned that Jason was at Nicole's and sped over in his white Bronco. He realizes how critical this could be. He also knows full well about his son, Jason. Why? Because he knows that Jason has been taking this medication, Depakote, to control the rage disorder, because he's been paying for it at Brent Air Pharmacy for years. He couldn't pick up the phone and call the police. He didn't want to implicate his son, but he had to know because he had 2 children there. He had Nicole there. It was a love-hate relationship between the two. So O.J. leaves the house, takes a pair of gloves, and puts on the oldest pair of shoes that he doesn't like, rushes there, and as he pulls in, there's the black Cherokee. He parks beside it, gets out very quickly, runs through from the back. As he does, he sees Nicole lying there in a fetal position. He pulls off one of the gloves. It's dark. He hears no conversation, no noise. The kids must still be asleep. He bends down to check her pulse, and as he does, her head turns one way and the body the other, and he drops it in a state of shock, and she rolls to the next level on the step, and as he looks up, there's Ron Goldman with his eyes wide open, full of blood all over him, staring at him. He drops the glove and runs back to his vehicle, gets into the Bronco, and pulls out, and en route back to Rockingham, nearly hits Jill Shively at the intersection of San Vicente and Bundy, where she swore that she saw O.J., and he was alone in the vehicle. Once he arrives back at Rockingham, he sees the limousine parked out front, so he pulls around to the side, jumps out, and realizing he only has seconds to get in and to get out. If he misses that flight and they find the body, he is going to be the major suspect in the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. He jumps over the back gate, losing his balance and striking the rear of the bungalow as he ducks down underneath the AC unit and runs across the driveway, and seen by Alan Parks, the limo driver. As he approaches the back door of his residence, he takes off the shoes, knowing full well that this is the only thing that could incriminate him there at the scene. He then runs up and grabs his belongings, puts the shoes inside a little gym bag. And how do we know that? Because when O.J. came out and they loaded up the limousine, Cato Kalin and Alan Parkson, he wouldn't let them touch this little gym bag. But when he arrives at the airport, according to the people at American Airlines, he didn't have this little bag. But the one thing that Alan Parks did say was that as they're leaving OJ's telling him, we're late, we need to hurry and get there. He says, it's awful hot back here. He turns his body and rolls down the window as they're driving. In my mind, out went the bag containing the Bruno Magli shoes, the only piece of evidence other than the glove by the bungalow at the back. As he arrives at the airport, he's shaking hands with people and being the OJ that he normally was. But he also knew that his son, Jason Simpson, had committed these murders. If O.J. had fought with Ron Goldman, he'd had blood all over him.
Because this is a very bloody scene. There were multiple stab wounds. You're talking about wounds that are arterial in nature, and there would be spurting of blood. You can see there is. And the person would be almost dripping blood.
If that's the case, when O.J. ran for his Bronco and opened the door and jumped in, the bottom of his shoes would have had blood all over him, his clothes would have had blood all over him, and there would have been blood all over the Bronco, but there wasn't.
They found some blood, but in my opinion, it's not enough blood. Inconsistent with somebody just killed 2 people, so bloody sitting in a vehicle.
The amount of blood that was found in that Bronco and the few spots that were found could fit on my thumbnail.
If you're struggling with an individual and blood is dripping to the ground, you would expect the soles of the shoes to be almost blood-soaked.
I have documentation of the scene. In fact, have 2 sets of a bloody print. Not only 2 sets of print, bloody print.
There was no blood on the brake and no blood on the accelerator. How in the world could O.J. Simpson have fought with Ron Goldman and moved his feet around in the blood and not transfer it to the brake or to the accelerator?
Either he did not drive the Bronco, but prosecution have a theory he wore a sweatsuit, and so he have to change and at the scene and get rid of the bloody clothing, then drive the Bronco. Of course, you have a very short timeline. You really don't have time to spend more time to change.
When Marshall Clark made that statement that the Bronco was full of blood, that was an untruth by Marshall Clark. He did not have time from the time the murders were committed to have been the one that committed the murders to the time that he was found at the intersection of Bundy and San Vicente by Jill Shively, from the time he arrived home to cross the driveway to go up and wash and clean up.
On the foyer, police found 3 drops of blood, and when we went there, we found additional 2 drops, so total about 5 drops of vertical blood drops. But the carpet, the front foyer, staircase, upstairs, all wall-to-wall. It's a kind of white, off-white type of colors carpet. Those carpet, you can't hide any blood there. Police and LA laboratory scientists examined inch by inch, did not find anything. When we get there, I test step by step, inch by inch, I did not find anything. That's kind of an unexplainable issue here. If somebody covered with blood, just impossible not leave any blood trace.
Based on the LAPD's investigation, there was no blood found on any of the clothes in the hamper, no blood found in the shower, no blood found in the toilet, no blood found in the lavatory, but there was blood found on these 2 socks in front of his bed.
We have some blood stain, Nicole's blood. The theory is when OJ at the scene, Nicole tried to grab his ankle, and that's how the blood was transferred. However, if you wear socks, somebody grab your ankle, you should find both sides, outside and inside, have blood. If you have sufficient blood, or you just found outside have blood.
But the sock found had blood on the outside and on the 2 inside surfaces, but there was no blood found on the other outside surface.
If somebody have a foot inside, how the blood got transferred from here to that side without leaving anything, it's kind of a very interesting issue and never resolved.
We also know that the blood that was found on the socks contained EDTA, which could only come from a vial of blood.
Dr. Reeder examined what the original data he noticed have EDTA. Subsequently, many other experts in the field, they all agree with him.
A reference sample was taken from another portion of that sock, and that was negative. So it wasn't contamination from the sock itself, but it was in the blood that is found on there, in my opinion. And that the blood that is found on there was not blood that had dripped from somebody on there, but that it came from a container that had the preservative EDTA in it.
I would hope that there was a reasonable explanation for the detection of EDTA on the sock, and that it had nothing to do with planting of any evidence.
We also know that when OJ was picked up on June 13th after coming back from a flight to Chicago, that he was taken by Van Etter and Lang to the jail. There, in front of Detective Van Etter, a vial of blood was drawn. We know that the vial contained 8 cc's of blood. We know that the blood that was inside the vial was shook by thanoporitis, and it contained EDTA to preserve OJ's blood. We know that thanoporitis was told to give it to Detective Van Etter, which he did. Van Etter put it in his pocket. When Van Etter returned the blood to the crime scene expert later that afternoon, it only contained 6.5 cc's of blood. That means it's minus 1.5. What happened to that 1.5? If Jason Simpson had been the one that fought with Ron Goldman and not OJ, he would have been covered in blood. If that's the case, He then had to go back to Jackson's restaurant to change clothes. He knew that if he took off his bloody clothes that he'd worked in as a chef, nobody would be suspicious of it once it was placed in the hamper, which is normally picked up on Monday.
We'll have all the bags of tablecloths, napkins, and then the aprons and the chef's jackets, and they'll put them all together in the back room, and they'll pick them up on Monday.
But another crucial point would have been that if that was the case, Jason would have had to obtain his time card. Jackson's restaurant is a restaurant that you time in and time out by a time clock. Jason would have had to obtain his time card and alter it in some way. But there was no way for us to know because Alan Ladd Jackson was not going to cooperate with us. Everybody at this point in my investigation was trying to protect Jason Simpson. As my surveillance of Jason at his home in Venice Beach grind to a close, just before Christmas of 2000, at the bottom of his trash, rolled up in a ball, I found a note. Once I shipped that back to Dallas and had a handwriting expert compare that to writings that I had obtained on Jason, I was told that the note had in fact been written by Jason Simpson.
After a lot of wrestling, working at it, this is what we were able to come up with. Dear Jason, there are 3 of us here that I know about.
I want solace. Work with solace. Now I am a failure. I cannot do anything right. I cannot learn from it all. I cannot remember. Alcohol. Alcohol is the root of all my shortcomings. I know I'm a good guy somewhere, but I cannot find him. My innocence is lost. My eagerness is gone most of all. And most, my will and integrity absent. I do not know what to do. No, I do know what to do, but I don't have the will to do it. In short, I'm fucked. I had so many plans, but now what? I cannot exercise the simplest deeds sober. Walking on broken glass.
There's a lot of frustration showing in that handwriting.
Sounds like it comes from a heart that's really hurting.
I had what I felt was another piece of crucial investigative fact. I had come as far as I could at this point. I felt that I had enough to release. But when I tried to release the information to the district attorney in Los Angeles, he wasn't interested. I received a letter from the DA's office which stated, "Because you failed to reveal any new information, it does not appear that a meeting is warranted at this time." I then tried to arrange a meeting with the California Attorney General's office, and their response was, such a meeting would be premature. And I felt that the only way that I was going to present my investigation up to that point was to write my own book, because so many books had been written about the murders, and I know there were people out there all over who cared. So I wrote and finished my book and released it. The reviews came out excellent. People were shocked about what they were reading and what was in the book. But because I published the book, I received a phone call. "I have what you need." What is it I need? I have Jason Simpson time card for the night of June 12, 1994.
He worked in a restaurant that I had an association with, and I talked to the people there and said, I want to see the time card. The time card was brought to me. I didn't go to the restaurant to get it. I made a copy of that time card, and it was something that crossed my mind at the time.
I flew to Los Angeles and met this man, who was a silent partner at Jackson's restaurant at the time, who also suspected the day after the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman that Jason Lamar Simpson should have been considered the major suspect.
I'm a Christian, and I don't want to be judge or jury of anyone, but yeah, I have concerns.
Did the Los Angeles Police Department ever contact you or a member of the staff there, or did you have to make a concentrated effort to get them to do anything?
We had to make a concentrated effort to get them to do something. I made that concentrated effort, and it was probably not until I don't know, June or July of it was probably end of July. There was a call placed, and two detectives came out and met me. And one of them was Ito. I remember that because later on, the Judge Ito that was involved in the case. And there's just the lack of interest was stunning to me.
A man who, very intelligent, very well educated, a very important businessman, who got into his car once he looked at the time card and drove from Jackson's to Nicole's and told me on the phone and in person he could have done it. The time is there. And according to the copy that he gave me, Jason Simpson on June 12th checked in at 2:30 and checked out at 10:30 p.m. When I finally received this copy and read it and laid it down, later that night, I woke up and suddenly realized that both that gentleman and I had looked at the time card wrong.
When did you leave work?
I think it was around 10:30.
Did you punch out?
Yeah.
When I looked at what I had been faxed, the day of June 12th had been penciled in, not time clocked in, penciled in. Jackson's had a working time clock, and yet the time card that we were looking at had been altered.
On the day or date column, there is not a Sunday that's printed from the time clock, and it's all handwritten.
And it was signed in, signed out in pencil, initialed by Jason Lamar Simpson. Another phone call. Again, the same wording. Mr. Deere, I have something that I think you want to look at. What is it? I have Jason Simpson's diaries. What? I followed your investigation on the internet. I have Jason Simpson's diaries. Plus, I have some other things. And I said, how do you know it's Jason's? It says Jason. I said, photocopy me a couple of pages that you think are important, fax them to me, and let my handwriting analysis expert compare them.
I compared the known writing to this document and was able to determine that this was definitely Jason Simpson's handwriting.
One of them describes, I am tired of being Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
I do not want to play Jekyll and Hyde any longer. They say famous last words define the heart of a man. I made my bed. I must lie in it. It is not too late for this young gun.
Now Jason was admitting he's tired of playing Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
What it could be is an individual who has, who moves from being so angry and so violent and doing things that later, when he's in the other part of himself, he cannot hardly believe and can't stomach and can't stand.
And in the second piece of paper, it said, it's the year of the knife for me.
A knife cuts away the parts of something not needed. This is the year of the knife for me.
That was important. This was Jason Simpson talking. I flew to Los Angeles and met the man who had bought these items from a storage facility that had been purchased by a friend of his. In that facility, there was only a box.
A lot of cooking magazines, a lot of documents and personal booklets and diaries, stuff to that effect, some personal belongings, some clothing.
In that box contained 3 notebooks, which were diaries written by Jason Lamar Simpson. But also in that box were a series of photographs. When you look at the photographs and keep in mind that one other crucial piece of evidence that was found at the crime scene beside the glove was a knit cap, or what everybody in the Navy describes as a watch cap.
It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
There in front of me is Jason Lamar Simpson lying in bed with his arm around his dog, wearing a knit cap similar to the one that was found at the crime scene on Bundy. Then I looked at the date at the bottom of that picture, and it was taken prior to the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman.
All the hair fiber evidence went to FBI. Subsequently, I did re-exam. I remember some of the hair is inconsistent with O.J. Simpson.
Other pictures where he's wearing a different colored watch cap has a date after the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. But nowhere whatsoever did we ever find a picture of O.J. Simpson wearing a watch cap. But we found numerous photographs of Jason wearing a knit cap. One thing that was also found in that box that was important to me was Erin, Jason Simpson's little sister, her death certificate. Why would that death certificate have been in the box with crucial items of Jason Simpson's past? We also found a little sheet of paper where O.J. had said, "I'm not going to be paying this pharmacy bill any longer." And one other thing, an envelope from the district attorney's office addressed to Jason Simpson's lawyer that had been hired by O.J. the day after the murders to represent Jason, asking for Jason Simpson to furnish them all his medical records. That was in the box. Why?
Well, me and my girlfriend were looking through the box, and we were kind of joking, like, what if there's a knife in there? Then we got to the bottom of the box, and we pulled out this knife. We were kind of laughing, and we were thinking, what could this have been? But we just packed everything back up.
My investigation led me to believe that the murder weapon was a chef's knife, based on the weapon of choice, the fact that Jason carried that type of weapon, the fact that he would carry it in the vehicle with him. All the things led me to believe at that point that it was a chef's knife. When I released the book, Brian Douglas, the man I ended up buying all these items from, that had bought it from a man at the storage facility, would have had no knowledge that the knife in the box could have been the murder weapon. So we had had no reason to go out and buy a knife and put it in a box to make it look good.
A boot knife like this, double edge, is basically a stabbing type instrument. Obviously you could cut a line with it, but it is not designed for it. It's a boot knife. It has a clip to be worn on the boot, or you can use it as a belt knife. It's what's considered a survival type knife. A boot knife is, it's designed double edge, sharp on both sides, basically for stabbing and cutting, but not slicing particularly.
We then took it to Dr. Vincent DeMaio in San Antonio, Texas.
This weapon could inflict all the cutting and stabbing wounds that are observed. And again, if you think about it, this is what this knife was designed for. This knife was designed to stab and cut people. That's its purpose.
The base of the knife, the way it stood today in our possession, was indicative of the wound that was sustained by Nicole on the top of her head that was found during the autopsy.
If you strike somebody on the head with sufficient force to lacerate the scalp, remember you're tearing it, you're not cutting it. A blunt force tears the scalp. If you hit someone with enough force to tear the scalp, then you can render them stunned, semi-conscious, or even unconscious.
It's a murder weapon. It's a weapon, according to the experts, designed for one purpose: to cut and to kill. And it belonged to Jason Simpson. Another item that was found in the box was a card from his mother. It said, "I still love you too, forever, no matter what." I couldn't help but feel sorry for Jason Lamar Simpson at this point, as I looked at all the items that I found in the box and realized that this represented the life of Jason Simpson. The diaries, the knife, an envelope from the district attorney's office, the note from his mother, the death certificate from his little sister. It made me think of a young man that had been crying out for help and didn't get it. Jason Simpson's life had come to an end. Shortly after the book came out and a big article appeared in the Observer, Jason Simpson abruptly moved out of his bungalow and moved down to Miami, Florida to be near his father. He gathered up all these personal belongings and put it at a facility called Public Storage into a box. Failed to pay the rent. It was sold at auction without anybody realizing what was contained in that box. That is now part of my investigation. During our surveillance of Jason Simpson at his residence in the bungalow there in Venice Beach, he would park his Jeep in front of the residence. When it would rain, he always had the top off, all the canvas covers removed. As soon as it was through raining, for whatever reason, he would come outside, put the covers back on, and zip it up. We were successful in purchasing Jason's Jeep, the Jeep he was driving on the night of June 12, 1994. Before we ever purchased the Jeep, we were able to photograph it without Jason's knowledge. The center console had been cut out like with a knife and a piece removed. We trucked it back to Dallas. We had it tested by a luminol expert, and it tested 7 hot spots in the Jeep.
From 9 years ago, I would be surprised in an open vehicle like this if there were any detectable blood left.
What we did and can tell you is this, that when we took the Jeep to Los Angeles for the filming, to do the reenactments of the crime, one night while it was parked, somebody poured about 5 gallons of water into the gas tank, trying to disable the vehicle.
A statement from my father. I am relieved that this part of the incredible nightmare that occurred on June 12, 1994 is over. My first obligation is to my young children who will be raised the way that Nicole and I had always planned. My second obligation is to my family and to those friends who never wavered in their support. But when things have settled a bit, I will pursue, as my primary goal in life, the killer or killers who slaughtered Nicole and Mr. Goldman.
I reminded Jason that on the day of his father's acquittal, he read a statement on O.J. Simpson's behalf saying that O.J. would be devoting his life's work to finding the real killer, and I asked Mr. Simpson what has been done to find the real killers, and he knew of nothing.
On the day your father was acquitted, you read a statement saying that he was going to devote his life's work to finding the real killer or killers of Nicole and Ron Goldman. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. What has he done, to your knowledge, to find the real killer or killers?
I have no idea.
What have you done?
What have I done?
Yes.
Did I pledge? I don't recall pledging anything to try to find out who did it.
Have you done anything?
No.
Do you know whether O.J. Simpson has done anything?
No, I don't know.
Keep in mind that in an investigation, I wasn't there and neither were my associates. We have to take an investigation and work on it and try our very best to prove what occurred. It's not easy, but we hope that we're completely accurate. In November of 2005, we made what we thought was going to be our final trip to Los Angeles in this investigation. We asked if we could meet with the detective unit or any member of the Los Angeles Police Department. We had crucial information that we felt that they needed. They weren't interested. Instead of meeting with us, they sent us an email. The email was sent to one of our producers. The email said, O.J. Simpson committed a double murder. Charges were filed on him. A jury decided that O.J. was found not guilty. The case is closed. We have no further comments.
I would certainly disagree with the position that he's taken on 2 points. One is his conclusion that O.J. Simpson committed a double murder. That may be his opinion, but a jury disagreed with him. Second thing is that the case is closed. Their case may be closed, but they could certainly reopen it if someone came forward with credible evidence that contradicted what the police department and the district attorney's office, the position that they'd taken earlier.
Once I received that email from the LAPD, I fully realized they didn't care. I did. I also realized one important thing, that the only way that this case will ever come to a closure is by putting it on film and for you to look at it. This is 12 years of my life. I want closure to this case for the families of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman and to their friends.
It gives me great concern, and it also gives me great closure because I believe what you've shared with me. It concerns me that if in fact you're right, then there is still a killer on the loose.
Does your partner get violent when drinking? Is your partner able to empathize? Does your partner have a Jekyll and Hyde personality? Well, if you've answered these questions negatively, beware, because these are red flag warning signs.
We asked Dr. William Flynn, who's an expert forensic psychologist, to review the records and information we had obtained on Jason Simpson. As part of his report, he completed a Violence Risk Appraisal Guide, or VRAG, on Jason. The VRAG is a tool used to predict the possibility of an individual committing violent acts in the future.
Jason has so many risk factors out of these 12 that he has a higher risk of being violent again than 95% of incarcerated felons. His score of plus 22 is at the 95th percentile.
We have tried on several occasions to contact persons involved in this case to go on camera and talk with us. They have refused. They include a certified letter to O.J. Simpson in Miami. He signed the certified receipt but has never replied to our request. A certified letter was sent to Jason Simpson. The letter was returned with Postal Service stating that Jason had moved and left no forwarding address. We tried the LAPD and they refused to sit down and talk with us. Christopher Darden said he wanted to get on with his life and to put the O.J. Simpson case behind him. Dee Burnett would talk to us and was very helpful in my investigation, but she refused to go on camera with us. The same was true with Jason's ex-girlfriend, Jennifer Green, who was with Jason on the night of the murders. We flew to New Jersey and tried to talk to Marcia Clark, who was the guest speaker at the Associated Licensed Detective Seminar, but she refused to answer my questions about Jason's connection to the case. We tried to interview Mark Furman. In an email reply, he said our only evidence that we had articulated was motive. He refused to go on camera. Paul Goldberg, who was the former owner and manager of the Revival Cafe, who was assaulted by Jason Simpson. He wanted $25,000 to appear on camera. Daniel Petrocelli, he refused. Tom Lang, the detective, he refused. In my 12-year investigation into the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman, I found a great deal of evidence. But to me, there were certain things that stood out, such as the knit cap or watch cap that had been found at the Bundy Drive crime scene that we now have Jason Simpson wearing. The time card that we now know that Jason Simpson forged. His alibi, which it turned out he had none on the night of June 12th. The fact that he had been in the hospital with 3 attempted suicides. The fact that he had been in the psychiatric unit of St. John's Hospital. The fact that Jason had checked into the Cedars-Sinai emergency room just months prior to the murders, saying to the attending physician, "I'm about to rage." His attack on Jennifer Green just weeks prior to the murders. His attack on Dee Burnett, his former girlfriend, and the fact that he told her just a couple of days prior to the murders that he'd quit taking his Depakote to control his rage disorder. His diaries, where he describes himself as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and it's the year of the knife. And another important factor, that Nicole Simpson did not show up for dinner, where he was the acting chef on the night of June 12, 1994. And more importantly than anything, the weapon that we found in Jason's personal belongings that has been described to us by experts as the possible murder weapon of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. It's up to you. You're the jury. Do you believe I have sufficient evidence to warrant a grand jury hearing into the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ronald Goldman? My name is Bill Deere, private investigator.
I remember another case Mr. Deere worked on for 3 years, the murder of Dean Milo, a corporate executive from Akron, Ohio. As a result of Mr. Deere's work, there were 11 arrests and convictions, the most ever for a single murder case in United States history. He was honored and inducted into the Police Officers Hall of Fame as a private investigator. I'd like to tell the murderer of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman one important fact. Bill Deere will never give up. He is the hunter, and you are the hunted. How do I know this? My name is David Harden. I was the hitman who shot and killed Dean Milo. As a result of Mr. Deere's investigation along with the Summit County Sheriff's Office, I served 23 years and 1 month in prison for that crime. I know how it feels to be hunted by Bill Deere, and you will too.
The problem basically with this trial is, or was, it became a show.
Now that I hear all this stuff about Jason Lamar Simpson, I feel like there's definitely something fishy going on.
The information that you put together certainly would have made him a prime suspect as far as I'm concerned.
OJ's personality just wasn't the personality of someone who would kill in the way this was done.
After what Mr. Deere said about everything, it makes you think. It gave you a lot of food for thought.
If every case we spend the time like you spend, this case should be solved a long time ago.